Hello there, guys, and welcome back to my channel, to what was supposed to be a simple, easy, lovely, international break therapy podcast, live stream, whatever you want to call it. You know, we're not quite sure what we are here. But unfortunately, there's never an easy day at Chelsea Football Club. There's never a quiet day at Chelsea Football Club. No, we don't do those because out of nowhere, seemingly, apparently, Roman Abramovich has been exposed. That's obviously in a very extreme way of putting it, but, you know, you need to find how do you word things on thumbnails when you have limited space stuff. So, yeah, we'll get into that. But Chelsea could face a points deduction over illegal payments made by Roman Abramovich or, you know, via Roman Abramovich during his tenure as owner of Chelsea Football Club. Mostly to agents of potentially Eden Hazard, Samuel Eto'o, Willian, all sorts of dodgy business that may or may not have gone on. And we will talk about that. We are not full of the knowledge as well. We tried to read a few. Well, I'm not sure about Ollie, but I tried to read through a few articles, but it's more like gathering what's actually happening, how much of this is scaremongering. Are we actually in real trouble? Could we face a points deduction? Because, I mean, Everton apparently are. So, you know, if it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone, really. I don't think we're any more safe or less safe than Everton are from it. So, yeah, we will talk about that. And apparently, according to Matt Law, make of him as a source what you will nowadays. But anyway, he claims that Pochettino's first choice striker apparently is Victor Osimhen. Well, he corrected himself saying, well, his first choice striker is Mbappe. But obviously that's not going to happen. So of the ones that are a little bit more realistic, it's Osimhen. So I guess fair enough. That is one of those. Ollie, first of all, let's try to touch on a bit of a more positive note before we get into anything else. Chelsea 4, Man City 4. It's now Wednesday. Still not over it. What an absolutely mental game. I do feel a bit bad sometimes, and I question my own and our own standards. Where I'm like, why are we this gassed about a 4-4? You know, we didn't win. But at the same time, it's
nobody's not gassed about a 4-4, though. Like, have you ever seen any football fans ever who are not gassed about their like a 4-4 draw? Most of the time, like,
well, Man City are probably not gassed.
Yeah, but at the same time, okay, like if you're the team that like comes from behind, at least, you know, like,
yeah,
I mean, like Newcastle, Arsenal. There's obviously our game versus Ajax as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, like, and those are games. I don't think people really question them at the time about the sort of the mentality around celebrating a draw, because it's the manner in which you do it, and it's about who you do it against, which is important too.
Absolutely, and I think that's fair. It's just, you know, on the one hand, I'm like, we were good, and it was a great day, and it was a great game to watch. And yeah, there's a lot of people that are turning it into, well, Chelsea are just making Arsenal, Liverpool, now Man City kind of look bad. Part of it, obviously, that is that. On the other hand, we can also just say City clearly didn't have their very best day. You know, all you needed to really do was watch the game and see that was the case. But still, I am still absolutely over the moon with the game, with the performance, with the kind of upstep in vibes that we've taken since kind of that Spurs game. Obviously, you know, it might all come crushing back down upon us once we play a worse team that parks the bus and then we don't know what to do again. But for now, we have some positive feelings to dwell in, right?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Where do you stand on it? Obviously, Spurs with that 4-1 the week before. Now Man City with the 4-0. Did it change your mind, or not mind, but your mental state about Chelsea Football Club? Did it help anyway? It did for me, I will say.
I mean, like, yes and no, because obviously it's always good to have good performances. And it's always, you know, nice to perform against the big teams, but that also kind of hasn't really been Chelsea's problem this season anyway. You know, like, it hasn't really been the big teams that have been the issues. And the reason we've played so well recently is we've been playing, you know, some big teams and, you know, who aren't afraid to sort of sit back, you know, aren't afraid to actually attack and go at us and leave space in behind, you know, and to their, you know, and really to both Spurs and City's detriment, really.
Yeah.
I think when we play, I think we can't really fully, truly know we've turned a corner until we sort of have a really good game against a team that has a low block, and we break it down, and we use creativity, and we really dismantle it in the same way that Man City would. That's when I would consider us like sort of having turned a corner properly in terms of the form, because I think our form against the big teams is always pretty good. It's always those points against teams like Forest or Bournemouth or teams like that who are gonna sit back deep, and you have to break them down, where we drop points a lot, and it's happened a lot this season. So So kind of yes, kind of no, in terms of
exactly.
how it makes me feel about the season so far.
Yeah, it's true. It's for me the biggest impact it's had in terms of just, like I said, the vibes. There's no, it's a silly word, and it's become kind of a silly word in that sense over the last few years.
It's feel good factor, like there's nothing wrong with that, and that the team will feed off that as well. It's important actually to mention that fan sentiment matters. If the club is toxic, if it's toxic online, if it's toxic in the ground, then the players aren't in the best frame of mind, and they're not in the best environment to succeed. Whereas if you string a couple decent wins together, decent performances together, a win and a draw against some really good teams. Chelsea fans, we've been so starved of decent performances over the last 2 seasons that I don't know. I think it's reasonable for it to be a positive thing, and it's going to have a positive effect on the team, hopefully, as well.
Exactly that, because the feel good factor obviously comes in a lot of different ways, right? It comes in terms of belief in the manager, which in our situation is important because we, as much as some people may not, believe in Pochettino as a manager, but it's kind of irrelevant because fact of the matter is none of us want another managerial change anytime soon because too many is never good. No matter, even if you change to Pep Guardiola right now, there has to be a limit to how often and how many, just as simple as that, how often you change your manager. There has to be a limit.
I mean, if they offered us Pep, though,
obviously. Yeah, okay, maybe Pep is the fair enough.
Pep's the exception that proves
everyone
the rule,
outside of Pep, all right?
Yeah.
There has to be a limit to it. So that's what I feel like. The belief in the manager from the team, from the stands, the fans. I think as a whole, it just believing in what you are doing is one of the most important things in terms of succeeding. Because when you believe in what you're doing, you're more likely to stick to the plan that you have, and then your plan is more likely to work. And that goes in every way. Like that goes against low blocks, that goes against, the best team in the world, that goes against, you're somewhere in the middle of the ground, like your Aston Villas or whatever, right? That goes against everybody. So
I don't think you know what? That's another thing actually about this season is that I think we've just seen a lot more of a consistent team, and a lot more of a consistent tactics and lineup and game plan. Overwhelmingly, as opposed to Potter and Tuchel and Lampard, who would tinker a lot of things between matches. Pochettino tends to keep things pretty similar, and that's really helping, I think, because it provides kind of like a stable environment and foundation for the team to actually work from, rather than sort of being like, am I going to play this week? Am I not? I don't know. It seems like it's a better environment for the team.
It's an interesting one, really, isn't it? Because on the one hand, you're right. He doesn't really change much. It's just the opponents that change, which obviously change how the games are. Rather than us changing much. So obviously there was periods where we did change things, like we played Enzo as a 10 for a while and realized, actually that's not a good idea. So that was a change we did make. But
or Chilwell at left wing, it doesn't take it doesn't take Poch long, thankfully, to work out when things aren't working. So
that is true. But what I was going to come to after you've kind of said that is me wondering whether that will stay the same when we have less injuries. Because obviously last season having a ginormous squad, okay, we still had a lot of injuries, but even with injuries, we still had a big squad last season because of how big the squad was. And also in periods before, with Tuchel, for example, it was maybe a few less injuries, but then therefore minor tactical and positional changes for every game. So you never had that consistency in there. So now it's a question, do you expect that to remain the case, even when your likes of Nkunku and Chukwuemeka and whoever bloody else there is, a potential new signing striker in January, all these types of things, is that still going to be the case? And
I think it probably allows for
players that don't play, they never play.
I think it allows a bit more for rotation of I think there'll always be like a core set of starters who will start 90% of the time, and everyone else will rotate as kind of is appropriate with fitness and availability and all the rest of it and form, I guess.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's just going to be intriguing whether he's going to chop and change it a bit more than or not. I guess
he's going to have to, because he's got some problems, but they're good problems to have. With Nkunku and Lavia coming back. I think you just add Nkunku in, you got like 6 players for 4 positions across the attacking 4. So 2 players are going to be missing out. And at the moment, you could argue like everyone who's playing in the attack right now is doing really well. So
once everyone's back, you could argue we have 4 players competing for 1 position.
Yeah,
which is on the one hand good, on the other hand not, I guess. It's like, depending on what way you look at it. Because obviously we'll have Palmer and Nkunku, Gallagher, and Chukwuemeka all fighting for the 10 spot. And at the moment, Gallagher has it nailed
I mean,
down.
you can technically have 4 on the left as well. You've got Mudryk, Sterling, potentially Chilwell when he's fit again, and then Nkunku. And then you add Nkunku on the right
let's not mention Chilwell as a potential left back.
Palmer, Gallagher, and Madueke. That's 4 as well. So like, there's a lot of different combinations, and Nkunku really adds a lot of adaptability, I think, and a lot of flexibility to what we would be able to do in attack. And I think that will really help us with how we set up against teams. And so I think for that reason, he kind of has to play, which then, like we say, gets into this problem of, well, who misses out then? Because, Gallagher's on top form, Palmer's on top form, Sterling's on top form, Jackson's doing well as well. So,
and let's also not forget that in pre-season, most effective Nkunku looked when he was on the left. But if you put him on the left now, you can't really do that anymore because Palmer has the right-hand side. You can't have not a winger on either side. So then your Nkunku
you need a
left
winger.
side is also kind of not really an option anymore, unless you take Palmer into the middle and play, say, Madueke or Sterling on the right wing.
Yeah.
But then you still don't have Gallagher as the 10, which is half of what's making us work right now, at least against the better teams. So who even knows? It's all up in the air. And JC,
I think that's the thing. It will come down to who we're playing, like, and the game plan in which we're playing. I think in games where we need to break down teams a little bit better, like if we're playing against a low block, maybe we're going to see more of Palmer and Nkunku and things like that. Whereas if we're going to be playing a game against a big team and we know we've got to be running hard, maybe we're going to need Gallagher and Nkunku, someone else. I don't know. Like, I think it's probably going to be based a little bit on setup for the opposition and form, and like you say. But it'll be really interesting to see how it works out. The interesting one, arguably, really isn't even Nkunku necessarily. It's Lavia though, because like at the moment you've got Enzo and Caicedo, and nothing's displacing either of them. Gallagher's been excellent. Where does he come in? Especially when Chukwuemeka's back as well. Like,
what makes you so sure that nothing, even in the short term, displaces Enzo or Caicedo?
Well, the only thing that I think really would do it is just to rotate Enzo out for fitness purposes, just because I think he's looking a little leggy. But just generally speaking, both Enzo and Caicedo obviously cost a lot more than Lavia did. Lavia still cost money, of course, and a pretty penny as well.
Still costs more than fucking Palmer, which is unbelievable.
Yeah, pretty penny. And so, like, he will play, but I think Caicedo and Enzo are now established in the squad. They're established kind of as a partnership together. Not saying you'd never want to break that up or rotate at all, but I think Lavia's chances will be like brought in quite slowly in order to partially protect him and get him up to speed with the game and stuff. But also just because of the way in which he's come into the squad, where he's got injured and now he's having to come back in. So yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see where he plays and how often he plays.
Yeah, it will be very interesting. I mean, I was talking about this with Aaron and Jamie on the post-match stream on Saturday, because I was, again, not happy with Caicedo. Maybe I shouldn't say not happy at all, but I wasn't happy with him.
Had a poor game against City.
Exactly.
I think it's fair to say that the rest of the team kind of carried him. That's fine.
Exactly.
Like, that happens.
He hasn't had a standout game yet, in my opinion. Maybe Spurs. Obviously, that was a game where I missed the large majority of the second half and had to watch the first half of my phone stood in a bus on an airport. So maybe that wasn't the best position to judge.
He was pretty good against Spurs, and he deserved to score against Spurs, and it was unlucky that his goal was ruled out against Spurs.
Exactly. So that was a good game for
I think he's kind of quietly having decent performances.
With Lavia in terms of Caicedo, right, is because I feel like in terms of how we try to play midfield, Enzo is the more advanced, Caicedo is the more defensive. But Caicedo hasn't really added anything defensively to us. That Spurs game, his best, you just touched on it, he scored. That was unlucky that it didn't count. But, defensively, was still not that much there.
I don't really see Caicedo as a DM, though. I think he's a box
what we bought him for, though.
I think if we have bought him for that, then we were misinformed, because I don't think he's not a traditional DM, as it were. He's not
a traditional DM, but he's not helping. Like, his tackle stats are awful.
They might be poor right now, for sure.
And
I think
those
he's just
were
getting
amazing at Brighton. Like, Neil Patel says, what does a standout Caicedo game look like? Well, just think of a standout Kante game. That's what he should look like. I'm not saying Caicedo is Kante or we should compare him to Kante and to that level. But, it's like Kante could have a standout game. That's how Caicedo can have a standout game. Doesn't mean he needs to score. Doesn't mean he needs to have a goal line clearance. You can still have a standout game as a defensive midfielder.
again, I think it comes down probably partially to tactics when Lavia is fit, because Lavia is a bit more of a firefighter kind of DM. Like, he kind of like, he kind of tends to stay in his zone a little bit, in front of the back four. Doesn't really sit, but like he's kind of mobile in that zone. And he goes around and just stumps out fires and snuffs things out. So if we're ever playing a really defensive game, that might be one that we that we pull out for them. But I think Caicedo's come in for a fair bit of stick recently, and I think especially after the Man City game, it is warranted. But I also think that he's having kind of under the radar performances. He's having like 6, 7 out of 10s. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing yet that he's because they're relatively consistent apart from this Man City game. He's had kind of quietly all right games. And I think as long as he continues to build that consistency, he'll be just fine.
There you go. Crispy makes a somewhat reasonable point, saying if the Spurs goal stood, everyone would consider that as a standout game. That's maybe fair enough. Like I said, obviously,
probably
couldn't watch that whole game, like I say. What I'm trying to get at is basically just, I'm not saying that Caicedo has been poor the whole time, not at all, but he's not been what you'd hope for when you sign a player for 115 million pounds, right? You don't want him to be 6 or 7. You want him to be 8 or 9 every game if you pay 115 million pounds every game.
I mean, I'd argue we're not seeing that from Enzo either, though.
Sorry?
I don't think
you have
either.
But Enzo does something different to Caicedo, and Lavia is closer to what Caicedo is supposed to offer us than he is to what Enzo offers us. That's why I think it's less likely that he comes in for Enzo, because if you bring in Lavia for Enzo, that means Caicedo needs to do more attacking work, and that means Caicedo needs to do a different thing depending on whether he plays next to Enzo or whether he plays next to Lavia, which is kind of the opposite of what we were just talking about in terms of Poch keeping it consistent, so the players getting on with that. So I think it's more likely that, I'm not saying in terms of because Caicedo is dropped or poor or whatever, but when Lavia comes into the team slowly but surely after injury and being young and everything, then it's just going to be interesting to see what a more naturally defensive player, if that gives us more balance. And if it does, that's going to be interesting. Because what the fuck are we going to do if he does somehow give us more balance than Caicedo does? Because then we're fucked.
I was trying to think about it the other day. I was like, do you play like a 4-2-2 or something and just forego the wingers? And then I'm like, you can't leave Mudryk out and Sterling out. Like, I know Sterling can play in a lot of positions, but then like you've bought Mudryk for 80 million for not for him to have a position at that point. So like, what are you going to do?
Even in a 4-2-2, where do you put Enzo?
I don't know. Yeah, maybe a 10, maybe the DM. I don't know. Like,
I mean, DM obviously, but then you again have like only one of Lavia and Caicedo, isn't it?
Well, I think it's going to be really rare that Caicedo and Lavia ever play together. I don't think it will be that common. If I mean, like, I think I see a lot of times where they might come onto the pitch at the same time. Yeah. Like, they'll be on the pitch at the same time, but I doubt they'll start together just because, like you say, I think they're stylistically a little bit too similar. And if you have too many similar players on the pitch, with this, because they'll have similar weaknesses too, then it's a bit more exploitable.
Exactly, but then the problem is also, you could say Ugo Chukwu is also along that more along that line, right? In terms of Lavia and Caicedo, while there's no one like Enzo, I guess Gallagher a bit more if you drop him deep, but we all, as much as great as Gallagher has been, he doesn't do things like Enzo does.
Gallagher's almost more like
Gallagher does. We also
Gallagher's more like Caicedo than Enzo for me.
In terms of what he does, maybe yes, but in terms of
cutting about, getting up and down the
pitch, no, if that makes sense, because he wants to be higher.
Yes, I mean, positionally, of course, he plays higher. If you played Gallagher where Caicedo is, or you played Caicedo where Gallagher is, I think the performances would start to look kind of similar. I think they both struggle more for what it's worth.
What does that mean about Caicedo who cost 150 million pounds and Gallagher?
Well, well, let's keep on the positive side and say how good Gallagher's been, shall we?
There you go. By the way, shout out Amit. Hit the like button if you can't wait for Nkunku to come back. I agree. Or if you hope that Chelsea don't face a points deduction. Let's finally get into that topic.
Let's talk about it.
We've been for 20 minutes and still haven't flipping got there.
Tease people
so
enough.
Let's start with the first tweet that kind of broke this news. We might look at another 1 or 2 articles after that as well. But let's just start with this tweet, which was the exclusive by Rob Davies from The Guardian. We'll read through the thread and then we'll talk about it, and then we'll potentially open the websites as well, or the articles on the websites as well. Exclusive. Former Chelsea owner Roman Abramovich used offshore vehicles, which I find a weird use of words, but anyway, fancy journalist, to fund tens of millions in football-related expenses that ought to have been paid by the club, leaked files suggest. Experts say Chelsea could face points deduction. The transactions today can today be revealed in detail thanks to Cyprus Confidential, a cache of 3.6 million files leaked by an anonymous source to... What does this stand for?
CIJ.org. ICIJ.org. Okay.
There you go. Stories that rock the world. We expose wrongdoing so the world can make it right. Fair enough then. And Germany's paper trail media, which shared access with The Guardian, TBIJ, and other reporting partners. Beneficiaries of the payments include agents linked to title-winning managers and players, club officials, and even companies connected to the owners of other clubs. Full details here. So many payments that we couldn't fit them all in one story. Colleagues at organizations including TBIJ and OCCRP run these things a bit longer, so they are highly recommended reading for details such as how Abramovich lent £50 million to owners of CSKA Moscow when both clubs were in the Champions League and would have faced each other in the next round had both clubs won their ties. Well, we didn't win the ties, so anyway, we worked with dozens of journalists from around the world over months to piece together transactions that leading sports lawyers say cast doubt on Chelsea's compliance with rules governing financial fair play, accurate accounting, acting in good faith, and payments to agents. I'll open just a website for a second now in terms of to get a nice, kind of picture to have as the headline, I suppose. Let's keep it at that. And let's talk about this, right? Because I think the last bit of this tweet was kind of important, where it says dozens of journalists from around the world have worked on this for months, because there was a few people saying, oh, this is just, a slow week in sports. That's why we're coming out with reports like this. Mate, people don't spend months of their time, like dozens of people don't spend months of their time trying to figure things out to boring international week, I can't talk anymore. International break week. Let's get the crazy scaremongering news out. I don't think it's that simple, if I'm being perfectly honest. But it's really difficult to really judge what this can and will mean. And for me, the difficult thing is also, like, from a moral standpoint, it's really tricky to think about this, right? Like, we'll maybe read through it, but to mention it, like, there's been dodgy payments, like, which was reported a couple of weeks ago already, that had to do potentially with Samuel Eto'o and Willian, who were obviously both signed from Anchi Makhachkala, wasn't it, in Russia? But now there's also that there was some offshore illegal payments to Eden Hazard's agent, to potentially someone in close contact with Antonio Conte, even if those people claim Antonio Conte is not an agent and a client of theirs. But the problem that I have is, now we could face a points deduction over this. In theory, that's, because it essentially means we could have broken financial fair play rules, which can, in hindsight, lead to a points deduction. Now, Chelsea's new owners have been very compliant with the FA, with UEFA, with the Premier League in terms of potential wrongdoings of the past ownership. They flagged a few things up themselves, including the Eto'o Willian bit, but other bits that have come out here, they have not flagged up themselves, which I find interesting and also slightly worrying, because if even they didn't know, how secret was it? Do you know what I mean? Or
well,
did they know,
I think the fact it's taken, he said, dozens of journalists months for this to finally break. It was probably a lot of work involved. Like, we know Abramovich to be a very secretive guy. He's a very kind of, he doesn't appear in the media very often. Like, certainly not, speaking in the media. He's very sort of quiet, quite shadowy. And so in the way that I imagine it would have been very easy, obviously, for someone of his massive wealth to both cover his tracks, but also to keep things under wraps, from the club as well, in terms of, like, you're keeping receipts and stuff. It's not unheard of, I don't think. And especially if you know who Abramovich is as a person, this shouldn't really surprise you.
No, it shouldn't really surprise you. The part that's maybe surprising is the wrong word, but the part that potentially I naively didn't really see coming is that we'd be hit with those things after he sold the club. Now, obviously thinking about it logically, it makes sense that more things come out now that he's sold the club and he's not trying as hard to cover them up anymore, I suppose. He
washes his hands of it, right? Like, it's not like the repercussions don't fall on him anymore.
Exactly. But that's the big question. We are not the ones that make that decision, but it's just a debate to be had before we get into the details of what's potentially happening. Because what I struggle with is the question in my mind, and obviously it's difficult for me because I am a Chelsea fan, so it's my club that is affected. But I struggle to what I think in terms of if our old ownership did something wrong, should the club under the new ownership get punished? Like,
yeah, see, that's what
the difficult part of
it
it.
is a
really.
difficult thing because I think for some stuff there needs to be a statute of limitations. I think for stuff like this, you probably have to say no because, like, in terms of a statute of limitations, only because it does historically affect stuff. And just because the ownership has changed hands, you could have anyone in theory come into a club, massively boost the accounts of it, with FFP, hide it like Roman did over 10 years or 5 years, or just massively inflate everything and then bound out before like it ever became a problem for the club. Like it would be quite an easy strategy to exploit, I think. So there's got to be a middle ground here where there's
that's where
like an
the issue stems
understanding,
from,
I
right?
think.
Because in all of sports, this is not just a football thing. If people watch F1 at all, there's been a lot of stuff going on there. Sports don't like changing results in hindsight.
No.
Because if you were to argue, okay, Chelsea under Roman Abramovich did these and these things wrong, you could argue points deductions for those seasons in which that happened. But then you would have to change results. And no one wants that. No other team, wants to win.
Nobody wants to win an asterisk
won the league under
title.
Conte?
No.
Who came second then? Was it Spurs or Arsenal? Who came second then?
I can't remember.
Well, whoever came second. Imagine they now won the league because we got a points deduction for that Conte season. They don't want that. Obviously, yeah, it'd be good that they could write down, we won the Premier League in 2016, 17. But their fans couldn't celebrate it. Their club couldn't celebrate it.
No, it's an asterisk. It's an asterisk title, It's just like it leaves nobody happy.
Exactly. So that's where you can't really do it. But what benefit does anyone have if Chelsea, now under the ownership of Clearlake and Todd Bowley, get a points deduction for things that we did wrong, which helped us win titles 5, 6, 10 years ago? Like, I agree with you in terms of that in situations like this, you can't say, it's a new ownership, so you can't get punished. But what does
where do you draw
really do? Nothing.
Yeah, where do you draw the line? Like,
it doesn't right any wrongs. It doesn't compensate for anything. Like giving us a fine, which I still think is probably the most likely sanction that we will be hit with, a fine rather than a points deduction. If it is a points deduction, I expect it to be a small points deduction that we will probably challenge in front of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and then God knows what happens. But a points deduction for something like I just don't really see how that helps anyone other than the media and I guess the governing bodies for a visual, a representative punishment, because it doesn't write anything that we did wrong then, and it also has nothing to do with what we're doing now. So
I agree. I think the important thing is is actually more. The interesting thing about this is the important part of it is that it's actually not that relevant to just Chelsea fans. Is that it's not necessarily just our problem here, because it's really important for, especially with Man City's 115 charges or whatever they've got, whatever we get as a punishment needs to be proportional in relation to what they get, not in terms of like 1-to-1, in terms of like what we did versus what they did, right? So for me, there's like an element and a question of fairness there as well, in that something would need to change, because so far Chelsea have been very compliant and very helpful and forthcoming with a lot of the stuff around the PL and the FA and all of that stuff to help with this kind of thing. If we're then retroactively punished for things that we've helped assist with, maybe us putting things out, sort of snitching, as it were, put the spotlight more on the club and the past deals. Maybe it did. You never know. But so the thing is whatever we get in terms of a punishment, which I think we will get one, because it does appear like we've done something wrong, and if we have, we should have a punishment. But I think it just really needs to be proportional to what a team like Man City gets when they're, when their potential charges are absolutely crazy. But it's just nuts, because like I said, Chelsea are being sort of very forthcoming, whereas the likes of Man City are hide behind a wall of lawyers. And so far it looks more likely that we'll get punished than they will. So, I don't know. For me, there's an importance to this about sporting integrity. There's an importance to this around, like where people's money comes from in football, FFP. There are a lot of important questions. And like you say, I think eventually it will probably end up being a relatively large fine and a small points deduction that gets challenged. And, in the court of arbitration for sport, and then you never know what happens after that.
Exactly. It's such a tricky one because obviously you mentioned Man City there with their 115 charges and we face a points deduction. Now, I think let's not forget Man City also face points deductions over those 115 charges.
But if anyone thinks they'll actually get one, does anyone really think they'll actually get one?
The problem is
it's hard, isn't it? Like, because you say for us, like, we're like, yeah, we may well get one. For them, it's like, I don't know. They seem really.
You're back to that problem of when do you punish or for like when an offense happens and when does it come out and you get charged for it and you get sentenced for it or whatever. How do you punish that? Because for 115 charges, you can't deduct City 300 points. Like, I mean, you can, but it's not going to change anything compared to deducting them 100 because they're not going to get more than 100, 103 maximum, right? So, if you change them, if you deduct them 300 or 100, it doesn't make a difference. If outside of fines, the biggest sporting punishments can be points deduction, well, then obviously it's not going to be particularly fair when you compare a couple of breaches compared to 115. But that's where the problem comes in, right? Mm-hmm. And also that's where the problem comes in if it comes in of being cooperative with the regulatory bodies.
That's what I mean.
Compared to trying to defend yourself. Because
because then
if you're
now Chelsea
open about it and you admit to wrongdoing, obviously they're going to be easy and quick to sanction. But when you always claim, no, this isn't true, and then, like you touched on, a wall of lawyers, and they struggle to actually prove anything in front of a court, but then is that the system's fault or is it our fault for being cooperative?
Because I think it's just about risk, isn't it? If they've got you dead to rights, like it may seem or may not appear to be here, then it's probably better to be forthcoming in the hope that any punishment would be like less severe. It's conversely, City have like the high risk approach, I guess, where it's like effectively they've been doing stuff that's not like that's a bit dodgy for so long that the risk is so high that any punishment has to be kind of thwarted no matter the cost, and so that's why they do what they do. Whereas Chelsea are doing going down a different path. Like this isn't severe enough for us to like need to block it with a wall of lawyers because ultimately, like. The difference is if our 115 charges, if Man City's 115 charges come to fruition and they get a massive points deduction for that, then then fair enough, that's what's coming to them. But at the same time, it's like I don't know. It just feels to me like we're not going to get as big a points deduction for me. I think it'll be quite a small one, and I just think. It's ruinous for Man City if their charges come to light, whereas this isn't for us.
See, I'm not even that sure. Like it will be a points deduction if I'm being perfectly honest. Again, because
there's a half and half chance, isn't there? I think.
Yeah, no, there absolutely is. There's a lot of question in terms of agent fees. While they are officially, obviously written down type vibe. And they affect financial fair play to some extent. Agent fees have always been a bit of a questionable topic when it comes to financial fair play. Exactly, a grey area when it comes to financial fair play. So it's like, and then if for example, potentially someone to do with Conte, but they claim Conte isn't a client, unless they can prove there was some direct contact going on, like.
And this is where that wall of lawyers is important.
If he wanted to, he's not forbidden to transfer money to someone. Like, he can do that if he wants to.
Obviously you have to prove like the reason he did it was in the interest of X or Y, or
or not. Like you can't just,
or not.
Like you don't know. The accusers have to prove that he did it for a wrong reason. Not he has to prove that he didn't do it for a wrong reason. Right?
Absolutely. Yeah, the burden of proof
which is very
different.
There are a few countries where the legal system works the opposite way, where the defendant has to defend themselves rather than the accuser having to find proof that you did something wrong. You have to prove that you didn't, which is how I think in Italy, for example, it works out, which is a bit strange. But anyway.
I think the biggest thing that I come up with this stuff is actually the point Jack Henry has made in the chat there, if you want to stick it up on the screen, Loz, because that's exactly the case. It's like, how is it in 2020 or 2021, whenever it was that we got sanctioned and all the rest of it, how was it when all that happened? The government went through all our books with a fine-tooth comb. They had to because they were essentially the ones partially brokering the deal. Anything that any sale had to be accepted by us. Had to be accepted by the UK government in order for it to actually go through. And so if they've gone through all of our books to to go through that, surely they would have found irregularities if they existed. Now, maybe they were hidden. Maybe they were hidden really well. Maybe they weren't looking for them.
Because that's the thing, isn't it? Like, maybe should read through it in a second, but essentially it's about offshore account payments, right? So those things, and they were not made by Chelsea Football Club.
That's the thing as well. Yeah,
they were made by Roman or probably not Roman himself, but offshore accounts that somehow lead to Roman, which is like, obviously, if you're doing secret payments, you're not going to do them in a way that they're going to show up on the Chelsea Football Club accounts, right?
No,
so like,
that's very true. But
so like,
I think to a certain degree, there'll be a paper trail somewhere.
Obviously, that would be just bad, cheating or bad,
there will,
payments,
but ultimately it has come out.
Show up on your account. So Abramovich isn't going to make secret payments show up on the account, like obviously.
But it has come out. That's the thing. It has come out. So
there is a trail somewhere. Via Chelsea's books, is what I'm saying.
No, but what I mean is there's a trail somewhere. So there is a paper trail somewhere to this information.
Yeah, and the question is obviously how, and neither you or me, and I'm not sure how many of these journalists that were involved with this know the answer to this in terms of how can it be proven what was attached to Chelsea and what wasn't, and what was just Roman doing his own things. Because
that's the thing as well, is like also how much of it was Roman acting in the club's interest but not with the permission of the club. What if he's paying agents and stuff, but he's paying them out of his pocket, he's doing it, but the club don't know? What happens then? Whose fault is it then?
Yeah, it's about when the club don't know. Like, let's use the Eden Hazard's agent as an example. If somehow paying Eden Hazard's agent to get Eden Hazard, and that's how we won Eden Hazard over other clubs that were chasing him at the time, I understand how that would have an impact on the football club, even if it was Roman Abramovich to make these payments.
But that's what I mean. It's like,
how do you prove it, right? Like,
if Chelsea reaped
why we got Hazard.
But right? if Chelsea reaped the rewards of it, but weren't aware actually that it was going on, how is it their fault?
Like,
that is what I'm getting.
You know how you said a minute ago in terms of it's not serious enough for us not to put up a wall of lawyers.
Yeah.
But also, if it was still Roman Abramovich, I'm sure we would have put up a wall of lawyers for this. But because it's a different ownership, first of all, we don't really know the ins and outs, so it's difficult to defend it with our own lawyers. Mm-hmm. But also, why would we? Because we don't want to associate, like, why would the new ownership associate themselves and try to defend potential illegal?
I mean, it's also the just the strategy as well, isn't it? Like, they prefer to be open, and while Roman preferred to do the Man City approach, like lawyer up, and that's what he did. But like you say, he's always going to defend and protect his interests. So yeah, it's crazy, man. It really is.
It really is. Let's read through a little bit of this article. Maybe not every detail, but to a bit more of the summary up the top. Start off with the headline. Chelsea FC face new questions over how Roman Abramovich funded success. Leaked files reveal secret payments that may have breached football's strict financial fair play rules. I just want to hint at something. I'm not sure if you remember this. A few years back, and I can't remember what they called the leaks. It wasn't Wiki.
Panama Papers.
Was it that? When the reports came out that City had potentially had UEFA representatives killed. Like, there was leaks.
I hadn't heard about that, actually. I was referring to the... 2 or 3
years ago. That was also like one of these journalists. I think it was There
was like a big documents leak that happened a few years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Panama
it was
Papers.
People in Germany that leaked it, or that revealed it.
Mm-hmm.
And in those leaks, they were saying that Man City essentially did that on more than one occasion, which is mental. But it's leaks, right? So this is... and obviously, it's a different topic. We're not talking about potential murder here. We're talking about secret payments. But it's still like, it's leaks. How valid are they in front of court? Like, I don't know. But let's just read through.
It probably depends on the whistleblower, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But then at the same time, like, these people spend like months and months on this, and then nothing comes from it. But I don't know what happened last time, because last time we were touching on these things now, that came out, everyone lost their minds on Twitter, and then you never heard of it again, really.
And it's happened a few times, this, actually, with Abramovich as well, where, like, or like with Chelsea, where, like, the points deductions and stuff, they've all been threatened before, but we've never seen it. So, I don't know.
The only thing we actually were ever hit with properly was the transfer ban. And transfer bans aren't talked about at all now, which I also find a bit strange, because...
I feel like we're the only club who ever got one. do you know any other club that got one? Juve? Maybe Juve got one? I can't remember.
Have one for, like,
Maybe Barcelona have one, but it's not many, is it? Like,
no, it's not.
And I
It's
think
not, and
maybe they saw that it
all
worked
the
for us.
smaller clubs, by the way.
Maybe they saw it worked for us, and they were like, "We can't do that again."
Maybe that. But there's a lot of smaller clubs that are hit with it, which is the ridiculous part of financial fair play, in my opinion. JC asked, "Is this source trustworthy?" Well, it's the Guardian, and it's very reputable sources from like Germany and other countries, like very high-profile journalists.
Yeah, the Guardian's an extremely trustworthy paper in the UK.
Yeah, there you go. But let's read through it a little bit and see if we can make a bit more sense of it. Chelsea FC face fresh questions over how its former owner, Roman Abramovich, funded the club's success after leaked files revealed a string of secret payments that may is the important word here.
Is the word, yep.
Yeah, strict football rules, including those on financial fair play. Experts said that the transactions uncovered through a joint investigation by The Guardian and international partners could lead to the Premier League imposing punishment on Chelsea, such as a deduction.
It'd be interesting to know who they asked for that. Who's the expert they asked for that?
Probably Anthony Taylor, to be honest. But
yeah, probably.
The files reveal a series of payments worth tens of millions of pounds over a decade, routed through offshore vehicles belonging to Abramovich.
Well, hang on, because I know it sounds silly, but we're only talking about tens of millions of pounds here. I know that sounds stupid
compared to like Everton, who got a 12-point deduction for 300 million.
Right, and that's part of. I think that was because that was part of their loan for their stadium, their new stadium or something. But
which is also ridiculous that even affects financial fair play, by the way. Because how does this idea of financial fair play ever allow small clubs to become big clubs if you're not even allowed to build a big stadium without a financial fair play problem? It's a stupid thing.
The answer is it can't, and it's built to sustain the big clubs. But what I mean is we're talking tens of millions here. I mean, in agent fees, that can be not that many payments. I know they said there were a lot of payments, and maybe there were, but it
depends on how far really millions goes. If you're talking 9 million, then because some of the agent fees will have been done officially, right?
That's only what I mean. Some of it will, some of it won't. Legally, but for example, you've got like a big agent fee, like Haaland's agent fee, for example. Everyone knows that one's 50 million or something went to his agent or something like that. Like that's half. Even if it's just shy of 100 million, that would something equivalent would be about half of what we've been accused of doing here. So I'm not trying to negate what we've done.
Was Haaland's people's agent fees officially? How much was it?
That's true as well.
That's the big difference here, I think, because we definitely wrote up official agent fees on all of these things here, right? On Conte's agent, Willian's agent, Eto'o's agent, Hazard's agent. I'm sure of all of these things, there was official agent fees that took place. But the question is, did more money get transferred secretly?
Very much potentially there's a chance for that. But what I'm getting at is in reality, this might not be quite as
significant as they're making it sound.
Significant as it's being made out to be, because even tens of millions could be 2 payments or it could be 200. Like it's hard to know.
Exactly. And just to continue here, the transactions in question appear to have been for Chelsea's benefit, raising questions about whether they were declared in accounts submitted to football's governing bodies. So they're not even sure whether they weren't declared anyway. They only potentially weren't declared. So even more so. Anyway,
I mean, if they're offshore payments, that's for a reason, right? Maybe they weren't declared.
Exactly.
But that's the thing, is the reason is they say may not be declared is because obviously they don't have access to the club's books. Exactly. Only the club and the government from previous, looking through it, probably had access as well.
Very true. Beneficiaries appear to include the agent of the star player Eden Hazard, an associate of the title-winning manager Antonio Conte, and Chelsea FC officials. Other payments appear to have been connected to the purchase of the players Willian and Samuel Eto'o. And like I said, this part, the Willian and Samuel Eto'o stuff, the club actually flagged up themselves a couple of weeks ago. So this, as much as this might have also come out from these leaks, that was already a thing. That is not news, but on Hazard, potentially Conte and other officials, that is news as such.
The other thing is as well, sorry, just really quick, is there a chance that the club has somehow caught wind of the fact that some of these things were coming out, and so they wanted to get out in front of it? But
otherwise they would have come out in front of it on all of it and not just some of it.
Well, you wonder though, like if they it's a balancing act, because I imagine part of them wants to mitigate the good Abramovich did, and part of them want to mitigate any financial costs that would come back to them. So there's a balancing act for them to make about not necessarily coming up with everything, but maybe coming up with some things to show that they're being forthcoming. But I don't know.
That's also a shout. Like, know about everything, but only tell them about a bit, so they still think you're super, like, cooperative and everything, even though you're still trying to, like, not look super
It's
bad.
like, if you steal like a £1,000 and you steal like £10 and the police come and they're like, "What did you steal?" and you give them the tenner, then maybe they don't think about the £1,000.
Yeah, no, it's a good way of putting it. There you go. The payments have come to light.
Don't take legal advice from me, by the way.
Hey, maybe do. The payments have come to light thanks to an international investigation known as Cyprus Confidential. A cache of 3.6 million offshore records leaked to the international consortium of investigative journalists and Germany's paper trail media. Blah, blah, blah. We already saw that on the tweet. Chelsea's finances are already being examined by the Premier League in an investigation that runs from 2012 to 2019 after the West London's club's new ownership regime voluntarily reported that incomplete financial information had been submitted during Abramovich's tenure. They're talking about certain trophies. The Football Association confirmed to The Guardian that it is also investigating Chelsea, while UEFA, the governing body of European football, has already fined the club £8.6 million over the admission, although its powers are limited because it can only look at evidence going back 3 years. You're trying to say? Go
on. That was relatively recent, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was very recent. I think it was in the summer. Now documents dated during and outside the period under scrutiny raise fresh questions over whether Abramovich repeatedly flouted the rules of football to benefit Chelsea as the club ascended to the pinnacle of the global game. Now we get into a few more details, off-book payments. Then we talk about the Antonio Conte stuff, the Hazard stuff. I mean, there's literally people that... Did I kind of find it now that quickly? No, I can't find it that quickly. But anyway, these people that supposedly had to do with Conte, well, they claim they have nothing to do with Conte. Oh, yeah, there it is. Pastorello declined to comment on whether the two deals were linked, but said Antonio Conte is not our client. I'm like, well, if he says that and there is no official trail linking them, then how can you,
Oh, like what? Yeah, in that case, like
Roman to this guy, if he has nothing to do with Conte, then what? What's that got to do with us?
Like, well, I mean, it could be just like just a way to stonewall a legal defense, right? Like, it could be just like he's not our client. You have nothing to prove that he is or that he was involved in this in any way. So good luck.
Exactly. I mean, but there is more, right? The files also reveal at least £7 million in payments made between 2005 and 2016 to companies linked to Zoran and Vladika Lemic. The latter, key advisor to Abramovich, was reportedly a pivotal figure in the arrival of stars such as Robin, Ivanovic, Matic, and the double-winning Ancelotti as well. But it's 7 million here. Separate documents show 250,000. Like, in the grand scheme of things, the problem about these payments are that they're secret. The problem isn't the size of the fees. That's what it seems like. Anyway.
It's probably the number of them by the look of it as well, because it seems to be quite a lot by the look of it.
Obviously, I named out like, Ivanovic, Matic, or blah blah blah. It wasn't like that there was payments for all of these transfers. It was like payments to someone that are somehow linked to all of these guys. I guess there could be more secret payments that no one has found out about yet. That could.
It's an interesting one though, isn't it? Because that one, it said it was an advisor of Abramovich himself that was given the money. It's like, surely if he's just under retainer under Abramovich, he's not working for the club. Then does it benefit the club? And then that's the question, isn't it? That ultimately is like how much of what was done was known by the club and how much of it benefited the club, I guess.
Yeah. It's really difficult in my opinion. I mean, there's even like, I mean, I guess we could read through the whole article, but it's potentially quicker to just bring up this tweet by CFC Daily, who took an extract from the article down below. Obviously, Eden Hazard's agent reportedly wanted a sizable commission worth around £6 million. In March 2013, a company owned by Abramovich agreed to pay 7 million euros to a Dubai-based company related to sport, but related to sport what? Unclear if declared to the FA. Files also suggest that Abramovich secretly bankrolled efforts to overturn the financial fair play rules through the courts, ultimately unsuccessful. But
I'd believe that. I believe that
100%. Well, I'm not sure if those payments would have then been made not secretly had financial fair play rules not come into effect. Obviously, we don't know that. But I still see more. Obviously, they make it about financial fair play because that's what people know about. That's what people understand.
And it's also what generates clicks and makes people think that we're finished again.
Yeah, exactly that. But at the same time, what it doesn't do is like the financial fair play, I don't think is the main issue here. I think the main issue here is illegal or secret payments, because why would you make them secret if they were legal, right?
Well, the problem is, and the link it does have to FFP is obviously that if they're secret, then the accounts aren't complete, right? So and a lot of the times we've been very close to the threshold of going over and being found in violation of fair play. So it's about whether this also makes the difference for that, and whether it was known that it was being done to deliberately circumvent that.
Yeah, that's the difficult part. This is a different article.
And like you say, for me, the reason this won't get solved for a really long time is because this is really hard to prove, even in its entirety or even in part.
It's difficult now, because obviously the question is, how much do these leagues prove? Like, obviously we don't know the exact detail. We read now what's apparently been in those leagues, but how detailed and how factually proven those leagues are is obviously the difficult part, because if there is literal proof of transaction between Abramovich and say Eden Hazard's agent, well, then there is obviously certain amount of proof already there, not in terms of how it was used and why it happened, but that the transaction itself is there. But if that can't even be proven, then it becomes a lot more difficult.
It sounds like they know the transactions exist, and it sounds like they know the transactions are there, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, but
if on all of them they know what they're for.
The journalist and something holding up as proof in court.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you say, it's about being able to prove actually what payments are for as well. Like, for example, that example with Hazard's agent with 6 million, where 7 million euros was sent at a later date to a company about sport in Dubai. And it's like, well, you'd have to prove first, and then that company was owned by, or at least had some connection to Hazard's agent. Then you'd have to prove that, that Abramovich sanctioned that money. Then you'd have to prove that it was done deliberately by Hazard. Like, if it made an influence and made an impact on that. Like, there are so many different burdens of proof here that are going to have to be beaten, which is what I'm getting at. Is the point is just it's going to take a really, really long time for this to settle. And it's the same. It's why it's happening with City sticks.
Roman could probably, play it off as philanthropy.
Yeah, like, you never know. Like, people talk all the time like City got 115 charges. Why has nothing happened to them?
But let's stick on that topic for a second, because a lot of people make that point. Like JC says, but Man City have like 115 charges. They did nothing to them. How are we the only ones who got punished?
Because they haven't done anything to them yet. It's a long time.
We haven't even gotten to the charges yet. Like, Man City have 115 charges. We are not even at the charges stage. We are at being accused by journalists stage, which is far before charged by Premier League or anybody, right?
But like I say, this stuff takes so long to do that. If you're a club that has 115 charges,
will take even longer.
They've got to investigate every single last one to make it happen, while they are being stonewalled every step of the way by City's lawyers. It's going to take a really long time for it all to come out.
And what I'm trying to say is they can't do like the first 5 and say, oh, you're guilty here, already get a punishment, and next year we'll have another 5. No, that's not how it works. You have to do all 115 in one go, because it's been done.
Because if it's that bad, then it needs to be a cumulative punishment to fit the crime, right? Like,
exactly. But the other question here by Lampard too is, if it's possible, how many points deduction will it be and when? Well, the problem, unfortunately, mate, we don't know. But it's still an important question about when. This season, next season. Ollie, you and me were quickly talking about it on Twitter earlier, where I said the hope for me would be, if we do face some sort of punishment, because people say, oh, we'll get relegated. Even if we do face points deduction, it's going to be so minimal that it won't affect things drastically. To me, it's still, though, because of where we are in the table right now, I'm not even sure where we are after the weekend's games, if I'm being perfectly honest. We were 10th before, got a draw.
I think we're still 10th, aren't we?
We're still 10th. So we're ahead of Brentford on goal difference.
Yes. The mighty.
Exactly. And a whole point behind West Ham, which fucking hell. But anyway, if we're affected by this season, on the one hand, you say, it's bad because it could stop us from going into Europe, which makes a big financial dent. But then
that's
only really relevant if we're talking 12 points or more, like Everton. Then that's a valid point. But because if we're talking 3 points, 6 points, whatever,
we should be doing enough to overcome it regardless.
The difference is going to be Champions League or Europa League. Europa League or Conference League.
But it's a difference in the money, though. Like,
it's a difference in the money, but it's
a sliding scale for sure.
100%, 0%.
Yeah, sliding scale for sure. I think the thing is, for me is I remember looking through Swiss Ramble's tweets a little while ago around sort of our accounts and stuff, because it was at the time when we were spending money like it was nothing, and I was interested to know how we were doing it. And he made a very cogent point, and those of you who know Swiss Ramble on Twitter know that he's one of the best around for sort of like financial reporting and stuff like that. He's a real expert. And he basically said that Chelsea are fine last season without being in Europe, but this season, if we don't get into Europe, it could be really costly and damaging for us in terms of the finances. And like you say, that's a sliding scale. But at the moment, we're in 10th, so things are improving for sure. But if we get absolutely no Europe, I don't think it's going to be a disaster. Club's not going to go into administration, go under or anything. Of course not. But things will have to happen. Like, for example, we can see today no movement on Conor Gallagher's contract. If they have to sell him for 50 million to balance the books out, it could happen.
Already been reports. Do we have to sell Broja to sign a striker?
Right, Maatsen as well. Like, so that I think those are the implications of this.
The homegrown ones, because they are pure profit.
Yeah, that's the implications of this more than anything necessarily legal in the short term. It's about if we do get a points deduction or something, making sure that we're still in Europe despite that, and that's really, really important, because if we don't have Europe,
you look at Everton, right?
We're in trouble.
I can bring up the tweet of that in a second. But they're deducting 12 points. They would now be on 2 points, but there's still only 4 points of safety. So, and with the form that Everton have been on recently, probably won't matter at all, because they're not fighting for Europe. They're only fighting against relegation. But because of how bad the bottom three are, might not make a difference, right? So, and no worries, JC. I'll bring up that next comment of yours as well. He says, based on what you've read so far, all I can understand is those leagues may or may not be linked to Chelsea players, the club and or Roman. And there is no proof that those were linked yet.
No, but the journalists are accusing us of that, and it depends what's in the leaks themselves. It's what's in the documents, because without that, we don't know if there's concrete proof or if there's not.
Exactly. I guess the question is, what do you define as proof, right? Proof in front of court? No. Proof in terms of that there is written documents connecting Abramovich offshore accounts, offshore vehicles, as they word it, to Abramovich, from Abramovich to Eden Hazard's agent, people to do with Eto'o and Willian, other Chelsea FC officials. There seems to be, in a way, proof for that. But whether that proof will hold up in front of court is a different question. So it's kind of like, it depends on what you define as proof, I guess. It's a tricky one for me, honestly, because, again, going back to this, when will it happen? Like, 115 charges, okay, we have a lot less now, but we already paid £8.6 million in the summer as some sort of fee, because we flagged that something was done wrong here and there. Like, let's not forget, people, when this ownership bought the club from Roman Abramovich, they put aside, I think, around £100 million basically to cover fees like this, to cover fines like this. Yeah. Because there were irregularities in the accounts, they were like, there could be some dodgy business going on. They put aside a certain amount of money to deal with that, essentially.
So that's not eating into our transfer fund, at least not in like, how you would traditionally think of it. It doesn't count in the same way that other things do, because the way that we've put the money aside, basically. So it's accounted for.
Yeah, no, exactly that. Like, and this isn't then a financial, like, if you have to pay fines, it's not like it affects your financial fair play situation. This is obviously separated, but it's also like, they accounted what, £1.4 billion they had to spend over the next 10 years or whatever on the club. Like, Rome made sure of that. How, like, we don't know how much of what is aimed for what, just because certain reports suggested something. But the interesting part, and this came from the Telegraph article, which I guess we had up, but didn't read through all of it yet, or any of it yet. But I thought, let me bring this part up as well. We kind of saw this already. Many of the documents known as Cyprus Confidential have records of transaction with the current Chelsea ownership, which the current Chelsea ownership have no knowledge of currently. Naturally, there are concerns the more might emerge. And Chelsea apparently released a statement, or not released a statement, but gave a statement to the Telegraph when asked about these situations. And Chelsea's statement to the Telegraph was, these allegations predate the club's current ownership. They are based on documents which the club has not been shown and do not relate to any individual who is presently at the club. And I do want to touch on that for a second, Ollie, because The more and more I'm hearing about this, the more and more I'm reading about these things, the more and more I'm less and less surprised how quickly the club changed everyone employed at the club.
Because everyone kind of had a bit of a link to maybe some dodgy dealings going on.
Exactly. Because, if someone that is still here was here while this took place, there is some sort of link. As much as they were not in charge, there's still someone there. If you say there's literally not a single person left anymore that had anything to do with this, it makes it much more difficult to punish us as a football club. It's more like, okay, let's try to punish Roman Abramovich as an individual. Do you know what I mean? Like, people were like, oh, even including me, I would have loved Marina Granovskaya to stay at the club, whether that was interim for, say, a season to help with the transition or longer term. But for these reasons, she couldn't, and that goes for other people at the club as well. But it's interesting that the club at least claimed to not be aware. Because that's the interesting part. Because, like I said, there have been topics the club did flag to UEFA, Premier League, FA on their own. But these things, they didn't, and apparently didn't know about. I don't know if that makes it better or if that makes it worse. Because that's why, like Musa, I know you love your funny comments, but in this case, I'm not sure how appropriate that is, because we did flag certain things, and now this we didn't flag.
Yeah, we kind of actually are like, we did something wrong.
Arguably, other things we have flagged are worse offences. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Like, if anything, we are like, I think we did something by mistake. Or like the previous people who owned the club did something FC. There you go.
It's very true. Lampard says, for me, next interesting thing is all this papers government had and they found nothing. Well, yeah, like we touched on, obviously.
If you're trying to hide something from
if it's offshore accounts, no. Otherwise, why would it be offshore accounts, right? So it's not just going to show up on these books, which is why current Chelsea ownership didn't know about it either, because if it wasn't in Chelsea books, they would have found it. Even if
the stuff they have found, they
might not have. These people, Ben Adegbali's people, Todd Bowley's people, they don't buy something for 4.25 billion without checking every single smallest detail first. Our takeover of the club happened quite quickly anyway, but it still took a while. These things are why it took a while. Do you know what I mean? Like, these are the things that need to be checked first. You were trying to say something? Go on.
Oh, it's just, like, it's no wonder, like, at least we would hope so, that the current owners did their due diligence before buying the club, for sure. But you would assume so. But like we say, it's more like that. If this is something to do with Roman's personal offshore accounts, like, that's not linked to the club. The problem is that he might have been using that to pay for things that should have been. So it wasn't going to come up on the books in the first place, because it deliberately was not put there. Exactly, which is part of the issue, I think.
Yeah, no, exactly that. I mean, it was Steve Brown. Apparently, he's an OBE as well. They've released this exclusive that Everton are set to receive a 12 points deduction by the end of this week due to a breach of financial fair play. The commissioners have decided, obviously, this was recommended by the Premier League a couple of weeks back. Apparently, there was a few things that Steve Brown has got wrong in the past, so let's see if this one turns out to be true or not. But like I say, it was already recommended by the Premier League, so this isn't completely unlikely. But again, this is why it worries me, because I'm like, obviously, I don't know the details of this Everton situation, but like you just touched on, things they funded their new stadium with. I'm like, but you're not supposed to get.
I must have been just in. I don't know the ins and outs of Everton, but it must have been the way in which they did it was wrong, right? Like that's got to be it. The way the owner has been, their owner has been poor with money. Like, it's just, that must be how they've done it.
But if it's money spent for the stadium, I just don't think it would even show up in financial fair play.
Well, neither of us are accountants, is the thing.
No.
So we don't know how it shows
know
up
enough, or a little bit at least, about how financial fair play works and what it deals with.
Yeah, of course, but we don't know how they've set up their accounts, and that's the important thing, because the accounts can be set up to have things as collateral. They can be set up to, just kind of sit there for ages. They can be set up to do kind of all sorts of wacky stuff. So without actually kind of having an accountant look through that and be like, they did this and this and this and this, and that led to the X, Y, and Z, and that's why they owe this, and this is now applicable over here. And that's like all the accountants speak, like. There will be something that is tied it to the way that they've done it, and they will have done it incorrectly by the look of it.
Yeah, that seems like it. But just quickly, regardless of, we don't know the exact reasons for it, but 12 points is quite hefty, I feel like.
I mean, if they get 12, City will get about 50. Like,
Not even,
you know,
like, honestly, City, I think if they get found guilty of even half of these charges, 115 charges, I don't even know how they could punish them. Like, because you can't just force relegate them straight as such. But they could even take their football license off them. Like,
yeah.
because like, what are you going to
Stop them
do?
playing in Europe.
Okay, they're
I
going to
don't
be in
know.
the Championship. They're still the richest club in the world, so they're going to be back next season. Nothing changed really, other than spending one season in Championship. Nothing.
That's
Like,
what I mean.
even if
You'd
if
have
you
to send them
pointed
all the
out
way down.
300 points, what's that going to do? Nothing.
You send them all the way down. You have Man City playing in the Vanarama League North.
Yeah,
That's what you'd have to do, or that, or like like for a certain
even
amount of time,
if they
you
did
ban
that,
them
you
from
know what
playing in
City would
Europe.
do? They would find some other club in Manchester that are currently in like the 5th division, buy them, make it Man City, and at least don't have to go up from 10th tier, but from 5th tier. That's what they do. These people always find some sort of loophole.
Yeah, I could see it for sure.
But yeah, the Everton getting 12 points does make it a bit more questionable, the whole situation, but it's obviously a very different, like very clear financial fair play breach. Well, I say that. If it's not to do with the stadium, if it is to do with the stadium, I don't understand how this holds up. But again, I don't know the details of it. It's obviously here we had that other thing. We're going to bring up the Telegraph article quickly and read through the summary of that as well. If we take a little bit anything extra from that we haven't yet, and then we'll get into a few transfer rumors in terms of Osimhen and a bit of Gallagher talk and stuff as well. Just quickly, the headline again: Chelsea face further claims of rule breaking via secret payments under Roman Abramovich. Club could be hit by sanctions after allegations that include offshore payments to agents linked to Eden Hazard, Willian and Samuel Eto'o. Chelsea have been hit with fresh allegations about potential financial fair play breaches during 2 decades. The 2 decades Roman Abramovich owned them, which could potentially lead to sanctions for the club. A new leak of documents to the Guardian newspaper has suggested the Russian billionaire who sold the club last year under sanctions related to the invasion of Ukraine may have paid agents and associates via offshore vehicles. All such payments have to be made within Britain, and as well as being subjected to tax laws, have to fall within the club's financial fair play consideration, now known in the Premier League as Profit and Sustainability Rules, PSR. The Bedad Egbali and Todd Bowley consortium owning Chelsea have already self-reported a number of breaches it discovered on taking control of the club and reached a settlement with UEFA, the European governing body. Many of the documents, blah, 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 we already saw that, have records of transactions which the current Chelsea ownership have no knowledge of currently. They are, by their nature, deals done independent of the club. The club has not seen the documents upon which the current revelations are based. Naturally, there are concerns at Chelsea that more might emerge. In a statement, the club said, this is what we read on Twitter earlier, these allegations predate the club's current ownership. They are based on documents which the club has not been shown and do not relate to any individual who is presently at the club. Also important is the Premier League and Football Association that are also currently investigating the allegations. Those allegations include payments offshore to associated agents and individuals involved in crucial transactions during Abramovich's era. The Italian agent Federico Pastorello declined to comment on an agreement with this. He signed with a British Virgin Islands company owned by Abramovich in July 2017. Pastorello denied to The Guardian that former Premier League winning manager Antonio Conte was a client of his. There's multiple things. I mean, here we go back to the 7 million euros Dubai-based company that potentially had to do with Eden Hazard. It was signed by John Bicco, the agent at the time for Eden Hazard, who had joined the previous year, especially if it was like March 2013 and he signed us the previous year. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just all a bit strange. The report also alleges further payments between offshore entities to associates involved in other transfers, including those of Willian and Samuel Eto'o in 2013. Jesse said on the potentially incomplete financial reporting concerning historical transactions during the club's previous ownership, it had acted immediately. The club said following the completion of the purchase, the club proactively self-reported these matters to all applicable football regulators in accordance with the club's ownership group's core principles of full compliance and transparency. The club has proactively assisted the applicable regulators and with their investigation and will continue to do so. So we didn't really get much new from it. It's just worded slightly differently, which to me is still interesting because I think sometimes the detail of wording plays a big role in how things look and how things... Yeah, no, it is true, JC. Literally said that 10 minutes ago. But anyway, yeah. It's weird. Reading the Guardian article, obviously it is them that found it, But reading the article, Guardian article, it sounds a bit more. Well, it's still not as extreme as the headline sound, but I feel like this Telegraph article makes it sound a lot more wishy-washy, a lot more questionable. Like, how much did we really do wrong? How much can we, like, obviously experts say we could face a points deduction, but when they say that, all that means is, okay, there is a financial breach. The worst possible or fine for this is a points deduction. That doesn't mean it's realistic, right? That just means that is a possible deduction, that the regulators, they have that option to set out that punishment. That's all that
it's like in the same way that like the maximum punishment for a robbery might be the death penalty, but it doesn't mean you're going to get it. Yeah. Again, don't take legal advice from me. I'm not a lawyer.
Robbery has the potential for death penalty. I don't know, but yeah, there you go. Yeah, it's a weird one. Honestly, the more I read about it, the more I'm coming to the conclusion that I don't think it will even lead to points deductions. I'm reading it from. I read this tweet from. Did I have this saved here somewhere? No, I didn't. From Rob the journalist who's been on here before. Him saying things like, "Oh, it could lead to a points deduction," makes me think it's possible, because he's usually very, trying to protect the club in ways, not because he's necessarily like paid by them or anything of the sort. I'm not trying to suggest anything like that, but in terms of, he's always a man that's, show me proof before you start to make serious allegations, I guess. So him saying it could be a points deduction worries me a bit more, but reading what we have read, I still think it's not that likely to lead to a points deduction. But I mean, you said it a few times, Ollie. Did you think it could? But
in the same way that it, like you said that, the maximum thing is a points deduction. Yeah. It could. I think we'll certainly get a fine no matter what. I think to be honest, I actually think whether we get a points deduction or not will be whether it'll be partially to do the compliance of the club and how they work with the FA and the PL and all of that. It'll also kind of partially be up to the discretion of the whatever judge eventually decides. What to hand Chelsea, because there's been an ongoing sort of rhetoric recently in the past sort of few years that financial fair play and its rules are a little bit toothless. And for me, there's a slight concern that because we are sort of seen as like the club that like financially cheated the most or whatever, the media narratives around Chelsea, that people would want to make an example of Chelsea as a result of that. Even I know with City and all of that as well, but I don't know. I just feel like that certainly could be a possibility where, because of the narrative recently of FFP not being like there not being as many consequences for the biggest teams for FFP, that there might be an example made. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
There you go. Well, no, I did say Everton is still not sure, because it's a journalist that said it's an exclusive, but he said it will be announced by this week. So then we'll know very shortly, at least, unlike with City and Chelsea, where it will still take a significant amount of time until something final will come out. But yeah, like Ollie said, it's all very much up in the air. You don't know for sure what could happen.
The story is we don't know.
Literally. But we're not claiming to know. We're reading the articles with you as much as you. When more things come out, I might try to get someone on here that might be a little bit more informed or whatever. We'll see.
I know a guy. I can get you in touch.
Very nice. Very good. That's what we can sort out. Even what you touched on with Swiss Ramble, right? Like, as much as he's an expert and they know what they're talking about, I'm like, but how can you make statements as such? Because you never know. Like, also Swiss Ramble doesn't have detailed numbers of wages, of agent fees, of signing on bonuses. So I'm like, how can they know when we will be in trouble if they don't know exactly how much all of our players earn? Like, even with Enzo Fernandez, if you Google Enzo Fernandez wages at Chelsea, I guarantee you'll find 7 different numbers, and you don't know which one is true. So how, as much as someone may be an expert, they won't get the books and to know exactly what players earn. So how can they know? See, those are the things that just question me. I'm like, especially when reputable sources do things like that, I'm like, but how can you know for sure? But obviously I didn't read it, so I can't say if they claim that they know for sure, or if they're saying that they are to some extent they're also doing guesswork. I don't know that, but yeah, it's just always so much of it is up in the air, because literally what we're talking about now with potential wages leads us on to our next topic, right? Bit of transfer news before we round this one out. Matt Law on London's Blue podcast said that, I don't know this for pure fact, but I've got a good source on it. I think Osimhen will be Pochettino's first choice. I said it at the very beginning, but some of you might not have been here at the time. Matt Law also said, well, actually, his first choice is Mbappe, but that's never going to happen. So his first, somewhat realistic choice is Osimhen. But then he goes on to say the biggest issue is Chelsea's wage structure. Chelsea would have to shatter it. And he says we would also have to do that. Oh, you didn't hear all of that then, Ollie. Chelsea would also apparently have to do that for Ivan Toney and a lot of other players. Are you here, Ollie? Your camera isn't working. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Oh, you're back, but I'm not sure how you're back. He said 2 seconds. So this is very interesting to me and kind of funny. If what Matt Law says here is true, the whole wage structure thing, because what Chelsea have spent the last 12 to 18 months doing is reducing the wages. Essentially, I think Portsmouth has deducted 9 points before. Yeah, that was especially lower leagues. There was a lot of points deduction. Bolton was deducted points recently. I feel like there was others. Wasn't there was more. There was a fair few that had points deduction in the EFL, in the whole football league. In the Premier League, a few less, but I feel like it's happened in the past as well, including obviously potentially or most likely this week Everton. But yeah, this is interesting because Chelsea are like, we need a big name striker. And according to reports, according to people like, what's his face? David Ornstein, we want a big, proper, like elite striker. Not even Ivan Toney will do the job. And then I have Matt Law sat here saying the biggest issue is the wage structure. Chelsea would have to shatter it to get someone like Victor Osimhen. And he even said we would have to shatter the wage structure to get Ivan Toney because he explained, well, this is Ivan Toney's last chance to get a big contract. Oh, was Portsmouth in the Premier League back then? Fair play, Nicole. Thank you. Lost my point of thought. Oh, yeah, because this is Ivan Toney's last chance to get a big contract. So he's not going to go anywhere for Chelsea's little wages here with potential huge bonuses when you win something, when there is no guarantee that you do win something. We'll talk about whether we want or not Osimhen in a second, Ollie, but the biggest issue being Chelsea's wage structure, that we'd have to shatter it to get Osimhen. This is so silly that I almost find it hilarious. Like, obviously, let's not be too quick, and we know Matt Law has his issues, but we spent the last year and a half trying to get the wages down for everyone, including our super signings of Enzo and Caicedo and all these lot, and Madrid. And we got rid of players like Mount, literally because they earn too much money. Like Havertz, literally because they earn too much money. Lukaku, obviously, a bit different, but we tried our hardest to get rid of him, literally because he earned so much money and other issues. But now they want an elite striker, but no elite striker will come on not crazy wages. So what the fuck do you do? And this is what I was concerned about from day dot of us. We're going to slash our wage structure. I'm like, yeah, but how are we ever going to compete with City then? With, well, United, they do it wrong, but they at least still are willing to pay big. Even Arsenal, they pay big to some extent when they have to. But if we're not willing to pay big wages, or if we're only willing to pay big wages to one or two people, then the rest of the squad will not be happy. So we're coming back to concerns that I had a year ago. Literally, this was my concern. Okay, wage structure, lowering that is all well and good because it sounds smart and important and useful and everything. But when your biggest rivals in the trophies you are trying to compete for don't do that, how are you going to compete with them for the best players? Unless you all sign 15-year-olds. But once you stop signing 15-year-olds and you want to sign elite players like an Osimhen, how are you going to do it? Ollie, thoughts?
It's an interesting one because it looks like from what I could find online that Osimhen's wage isn't all that high. Like I think like Italian clubs don't have that much money
now, but to move.
Obviously to move he'll want more, but I don't think it's necessarily wage structure shattering money that he's going to want. Maybe he wants 200k, 250k. They already gave that to Sterling. And it seems that that is kind of the money that this club will give to established superstars, and they have. So I'm not actually that worried about it, because I think having the wage structure the way it is makes a strong foundation and an incentive for success, which gives the club something to build off of as well. So for me, I think, everyone keeps saying that Chelsea only are able to just splash the cash, and that's why everyone's choosing to come to Chelsea. This happened a lot when Caicedo and Lavia joined. Yeah. They said Chelsea are just splashing the cash, the wages are just crazy high, and that's why all this, that's why they're getting all these players. But from what we've seen, the players aren't on that high wages. That we've seen, right? Fair enough, the numbers could be bodged, we know, but I don't know. It seems like to me that we've got space for an Osimhen. We've probably got space for a couple Osimhens. So, and considering where the team will continue to get to, I think it's a smart move in conjunction with the long contracts we've got. For me, I don't know. I think the fact that the way Matt Law here has spoken is really interesting, because he said Chelsea would have to shatter the wage structure. Okay, I think that's a bit dramatic, personally, but also who's to say that Chelsea won't? That's kind of where I'm at with it as well. If you think
if months make us think that, I guess, because we signed Enzo Fernandez, and you say, Enzo Fernandez was young player of the World Cup. Enzo Fernandez won the World Cup. Enzo Fernandez, yes, okay, only played at Benfica, still a superstar. So if you're only giving Enzo Fernandez, and again, there's varying numbers that float about. There's numbers from 100k a week to 180k a week that float about for him. So you don't know for sure. But obviously, we know Reece is on 250k. We know Sterling is on nearly 300k. We know Chile is on
a little over 300. Sterling is.
Or is it even 325? Maybe it's over 300. Even.
It's like 305, 325, something like that.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, yeah. And Chile is on 200 and something odd as well after his contract extension last season. So I agree that in terms of what does shatter it mean, right? But at the same time, obviously we got Enzo on that. So I guess you could argue if Enzo said no, maybe we would have increased the offer to him had he said no initially, I suppose. But I think Sterling is a bad example to use because it was the first signing under the new ownership.
Yeah. What I'm getting at is I just think there's room to maneuver.
When they didn't have a single doubt over making Europe.
But remember, they were one of the team. They did give Reece James that 250k contract.
Again, that was early on.
But who's to say it wouldn't have happened in the end anyway? What I'm getting at is there's been a lot of prudent, smart signings recently for the future, but I don't think that's necessarily that isn't necessarily a mutually exclusive thing. I think you can also have the break the bank. That's almost why you do it, right? You save money on the other wage structure, and you save money wherever you can in transfer fees and whatnot, so that you can go out and buy the big names, the Galacticos, the superstars, because then you can afford to, right? That's kind of the way I see it. Like, for me, it's creative accounting that's making space.
Enough of the superstar to do that for him. Like, we're not talking about Mbappe here. We're talking about Osimhen, who scored less goals in Serie A than Lukaku had.
Listen, the club seem to think so.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what matters.
It's true.
The thing that worries me about Osimhen more actually is his injuries. He's never played more than, I think, 30 full 90s in a season, which isn't great. And especially in the last 12 months, I think he's had 3 upper leg problems in the past year. And I wouldn't go as far to say he's injury prone, but I think that's certainly an area of concern. And if you're getting a striker like that, you want them around all the time, right? Like, you don't want, if you're buying a star striker, they need to play all the time. They can't be playing 30 games a season or fewer. It needs to be all of them,
It does. I can bring up his injury record here if you want to. Obviously, this is the official one. Sometimes it's a little bit different. It's not crazy, you have to say.
It's not terrible. It's the 3 that worry me. It's that muscle fatigue, abductor, hamstring, muscular. Those last 4, they're all in a similar place in terms of where they are on the body. And in a reasonably short amount of time.
Yeah.
No, that's true. But usually that muscle fatigue is in the legs, right?
How did they even know about this? Like, it was from August 2nd to August 7th. This was in pre-season, and he was out for 5 days. Like, how do you?
I guess it was reported, but the point is the rest of it is all right actually, because it's just like his shoulder and COVID and stuff like that, and the odd broken cheekbone. Like, that's a freak accident, but it's those muscular injuries that I'm more worried about than anything else. Like 3 or 4 in
especially with
the
high intensity of the Prem compared to what he's used to.
Well, that's what I'm thinking as well. Is like, if that's what happens in the Prem, what happens? If that's what happens in Serie A, what happens in the Prem when the intensity goes up a level and Poch's training that goes, like up several levels, probably. That's the only concern I have. Because other than that, obviously, extremely talented boy, brilliant striker, no doubt. But I don't know. I think it seems like a big risk to go for him at the moment.
There you go. That's the interesting
But then again,
part.
who else is there? I don't know.
That's the problem, right? So
Evan
obviously,
Ferguson back to Brighton. We'll do it again.
Yeah. Oh wait.
Oh dear.
It's a difficult one, and I also want to clarify, just because I listened to what Matt Law said there. He also said he sees it as extremely unlikely anything to do with Osimhen happens in January, but he says he wouldn't be surprised if Osimhen joined Chelsea in the summer. I mean, he is known to have grown up as at least partly a Chelsea fan because, well, every West African striker's idol was Didier Drogba in that era. So therefore, automatically we'll have some sort of affiliation with Chelsea. Obviously, John Obi Mikel was captain of the Nigerian national team for a significant period. Osimhen is Nigerian. Obviously, there was this John Obi Mikel podcast in which he basically said, well, I'm making sure you come into Chelsea next summer. There's not even a question about it. I will make sure. Osimhen said,
Thank you, Mikel.
Exactly. Osimhen said as a kid, he had a Chelsea shirt and a Man United shirt. That was like his thing. United already have Højlund, but you never know with Man United. They might just try to buy Osimhen anyway. But people, to clear this up really quickly, by the way, there is no way we get Osimhen in January. People need to get this out of their heads. I don't even think we'll try to get Osimhen in January because it's so ridiculous to even attempt that.
I'd be interested. I think if anyone would do it, it would be our owners.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Maybe I shouldn't have said they won't try, but
they'll definitely try.
Our owners will have a rude awakening when they deal with De Laurentiis for the first time, I think.
They already dealt with Rui Costa. I know De Laurentiis is a different animal, but like
it's two different kettle of fish.
No, I get it, but at the same time, they're not dissimilar in the way they are, especially in the way they run their clubs. But
do you think so? Because I feel like Benfica,
Napoli are just in a better position to not sell. Napoli are just in a better position to not sell because they're in a they're in a top 5 league. They're a top team in a top 5 league.
Last 15 years straight. Like, when have Benfica ever not sold someone?
That's what I'm getting at. Like, they're in a better position not to sell, but that doesn't mean they don't operate in similar ways.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, let's talk about this. I don't think there was any rumor saying we are considering that. I think the rumor was that he might come back to the Premier League. No one said Chelsea. And no, Timo Werner is not, will not, and should not come back to Chelsea. Do not have to worry. The biggest club he'll get is fucking Everton. Do you know what I mean?
I would love to see him in a counter-attacking side. I would love
maybe
that.
Maybe we'll go to fucking Luton. Ross Barkley and Timo Werner link up. Do you know what I mean?
Like whatever. Like go to one of them. Like, we'd be really good at West Ham. Like, like a good counter-attacking team. Like,
would he even actually? I'm not even sure if he'd be good enough for West Ham. I'll be honest.
Yeah, it'd be like Bowen just on the other side
nowadays.
The thing for me is he'd have to be a winger. He's not a striker. Not in the Prem.
He's not a winger either. He's nothing. He's not even a footballer.
Listen, I think you're not giving necessarily enough credit there, but I also don't want him back for the same reasons. It's like,
even though Leipzig are good now.
Yeah, Leipzig are good, and Werner's a decent striker on his day in some cases against Southampton, or in the Champions League final. But other than that, there's not really a reason to want him back. Not really, because I don't think we've got any player currently in our attack who Werner would replace.
Mate, if they told me the season membership goes up by £5 in order for us to not sign Werner, I'd be perfectly happy with that. Do you know what I mean? Like, no, Timo Werner is not coming back. I would literally start a protest if he does. But yeah, let's get back to Osimhen for a second. What you touched on is the real issue, isn't it? Because you have Ivan Toney as an option. but I also understand why the club potentially have their doubts. I have my doubts. I know people put it out as by far and clearly the best option. People are back to believing Premier League proven means everything. I don't understand why anyone ever thinks that. It is baffling to me. Like, Grealish
just
because in the
we've been
Premier League
burned before. That's it. That's all. That's all it is. People are saying, that's all it is. People, you've just been burnt before, and so people go, no, so they return to what they know with the Prem. But it's not always the case. Not even close.
No, absolutely. Like, there's so many examples of Premier League moves flopping. Alexis Sanchez to Man United. I mean, Mkhitaryan worked nowhere in the Premier League, I guess, so maybe he's not the best example. I mean, Grealish was good last season. Now lost his spot to Doku. First season was poor at Man City in the grand scheme of things. He wasn't awful, but for what he cost and stuff. Like Cucurella, dreadful last season. Now, sure, they're doing okay this season, but if you give them a season time to adapt, then it doesn't matter where you buy them from. Within a season, they'll probably be all right from wherever they come. And people always say this about Lukaku and Serie A. That's not the big thing here. Lukaku also scored countless amounts of Premier League goals. Lukaku has more Prem goals than Drogba. Like, being a Premier League proven striker or Premier League proven anything doesn't mean anything, especially when you come from a team like Brentford that is so abundantly different in every way to Chelsea. Like, teams don't play against Brentford like they play against Chelsea. That is everything about what Ivan Toney has experienced at Brentford will be different if he comes to Chelsea. So, yes, he's Premier League experienced, but has he ever, other than maybe Luton, and, well, they weren't in a Prem last season, so not even those, because he's now not allowed to play. Is he, like, it's going to be new for him all the same, in my opinion. So, to me, there is no bigger guarantee with Toney than there is with Osimhen. But Osimhen will be more expensive. That's the big deal about it. But the problem is I don't know who else. We're not going to get Mbappe. So then who else is there? That's a top striker. Kane's gone. Haaland's gone. So
your best option, as much as I joke about it, is going back to Brighton for Evan Ferguson. But he's a kid, is the thing. Victor Boniface, maybe.
I don't know. He's the next one who I'm not really sold on.
Yeah, I'm not that.
I mean, in 2 years, Boniface might be great, but so far, Boniface has done less.
Back in for your favourite player, Vlahovic?
Yep. Yeah, you saw that reaction. Yeah,
that's the thing. The striker market is really dry at the moment. That's part of the problem. Yeah. But the problem is anyone who kind of emerges into that market is going to have that label of sort of not being proven. It doesn't matter who you pick. So unless we're willing to wait another year for another striker who's already all right to become even better, and then for us to go, no, he's proven now, and pick him, we're going to have to either go with someone like Osimhen or pick someone who's going to be a risk.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, JC says, then Laos, tell me one good striker who was successful at Chelsea apart from Drogba and Costa. Well, none. Well, yeah, but if you're going back more serious amounts of time, but none. And that didn't matter whether you bought Torres from the Premier League or Morata from Serie A or La Liga or Werner from the Bundesliga. It didn't matter who you bought, where you bought them from. None of them worked, regardless of Prem proven or not. That's
Abraham was all right.
Sorry?
Abraham was all right.
Yeah, but we didn't buy him from anywhere. But yeah.
No, that's true. We didn't buy him. But he just didn't answer to JC's question.
Yeah, that's true. I also wouldn't be totally shocked if we somehow miss out on Osimhen, that we're going to get Tammy back in some sort of deal with Lukaku. Just because we're so desperate to get rid of Lukaku, and Roma having Lukaku, they don't need Tammy. So we'll see about that one.
Yes, we'll see.
Thomas Basie, and I guess that is something I'll also be interested to see what you think about this, Ollie. He says, Chelsea will get years and years of scrutiny if we sign Toney. Our rep isn't great. I'm not sure I agree with that. Do you agree with that, Ollie, that we'll have scrutiny if we sign Toney after the betting scandal?
I think once he served his time, it's a different thing. Once he served his ban, it's a bit different. It depends. I think it would be much less, but I think it would be much worse if he went to someone like Newcastle with their current issues. I think in terms of gambling, the Chelsea.
I think if you just went to a club that had a gambling sponsor, then it would be an issue.
Yeah, like if we had stake, like we were planning on getting that's not great. But I think it would be okay.
Yeah, I agree. Like for Toney, the same as for Tonali, obviously we don't know if that's the reality, but they're all painting it as, gambling addiction. And people don't usually scrutinize people for addiction anymore nowadays. So I don't think so, to be perfectly honest. If he does something again and that happens while he's at Chelsea, then yes. But if we just sign him after the ban's done, I don't think so.
I think the thing is,
another thing
there needs to be something for us
that
to
he'll
just
only be
know
available
better.
from what was. Say that again, sir.
I think that there just needs to be due diligence done, so that a mistake doesn't happen, because otherwise we could turn around and be like, no, we should have known better.
Yeah, absolutely. But then just make sure you somehow stop him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Ironically, Tony is a gamble.
Very, very much so. Hey, it's like Barcelona did with Suarez. If you do sign Tony, you just put something in his contract that if he does do that again, like Suarez at Barcelona had it, if he bit someone again, they would immediately be allowed to terminate his contract without having to pay him anything or whatever else. Right? That's what you'd have to do with Tony. If he gambled again, you'd immediately be allowed to terminate. Like, you'd have to put some sort of clause in a contract, obviously. But yeah. It's difficult. It's difficult to know know what to expect with these potential charges, sanctions, points deductions, whatever we could get. And it's difficult to know what we're going to do with the striker and what even the best solution is. As much as there was periods a couple of weeks ago when we were all in a boat of, oh, fuck's sake, we need a striker in January. I think it's better for us if we only sign one in the summer, personally, because then I think we
need to see what Nkunku does first.
Exactly. And also have Jackson have more time, have Broja have more time.
And you're right, that really can't really happen until the summer, because with Nkunku coming back quite soon, it's like, but it's not really soon enough to actually gauge whether we're going to need another striker in January or not.
Exactly. But the problem is, Tony, your realistic chance is January. Osimhen, your realistic chance is the summer. So it's kind of like, well, the club seem to have decided against Tony anyway, if you believe David Ornstein. And why wouldn't you believe David Ornstein? But maybe the reason for deciding against Tony is also that they're like, okay, if we can get him, it's going to be in January or never, because otherwise someone else probably will sign him in January, you'd assume. But if you're too unsure about what and who you need in January, then it makes more sense to wait until the summer. Especially because how often do January signings hit immediately? It doesn't happen anyway. Like, I know you are not a hater, but like very critical of João Felix, and you said, it was good that he never stayed, blah, blah, blah. I don't think you can even, like, as much as to some extent I agree with that, I don't think that 6 months that he was here last season is any sort of indicator about how good or not good he would have been this season. Because that was such a crazy, fucked up situation at the football club. And to come from years of La Liga and before that, and also playing defensive and counter-attacking football at Atletico for years and years, to come to Chelsea in the worst situation we've literally ever been in, no one would have been very good. Yeah, okay, Bruno Fernandes is a valid chat. I meant at Chelsea, but yeah, it's true. So to me, it's like, even if you sign someone in January, will they really affect this season results that much? I don't think so. Unless you get, obviously, like an Mbappe, but we won't. So yeah, it's so difficult for me, because literally since before the summer, I've been sat here and I'm like, I don't know which striker we should get. I genuinely don't know. And I still don't know, because they all have pros and they all have cons, and none of them have clearly outweigh the other, in my opinion. I don't know how you see that, Oli, but for me, that's the biggest issue. And that's why I'm like, for once, I'm not going to sit here and say, the recruitment team is stupid, the recruitment team this doesn't know what they're doing. Because I wouldn't want to be in the recruitment team right now, because the likelihood you pick a striker that works for us right now, to me, is small, no matter who you pick. So that's one of the reasons why I'd go for Tony, because it'd be less expensive. So it's less risk, purely for financial reason. But do you see it similarly? That it's like, you just don't know who's going to be good.
We'll wait and see, man. Like I don't know. It depends whether we'd want to do something in January or not. Like you say, January, maybe Tony, Osimhen probably for the summer. We'll know what the club's plans are in due course.
Exactly. It's a tricky one. It's really difficult to know what to expect. There's also a lot of things depend on Mbappe. Like, what does Mbappe do, right?
Yeah,
Does Mbappe end up
do
in
we
Real
go in
Madrid?
for him? You never
Even
know.
okay, I find that so unlikely. I'm not even entertaining that. But to me, it's like, what if he ends up staying at PSG again? Does that make Gonzalo Ramos available again?
Yeah, you
Because
never know.
didn't PSG kind of sign him expecting Mbappe to leave? Like, then that changes things again for the club.
Yeah.
But if Real Madrid don't get Mbappe, who do they get then? Right? Does that change the availabilities of other players? Who knows? It's not like Real Madrid have anyone right now because we're not going to get fucking Joselu, are we?
So the thing is, as well, with Madrid is what happens if they did get Madrid? Does that make Vinicius Junior available if he plays on the left?
Nah, I don't think he'll play on the left because they don't have a striker. So,
but Mbappe prefers playing on the left, and maybe that's what's held things up previously. Do you see what I mean? Like,
does he prefer to play on the left? Do we know that?
It's pretty well documented. He prefers the left. He plays at striker, but he prefers the left.
I don't know because it's like, well, it's Real Madrid. Would you then not?
I think if it's Real Madrid, maybe it's different.
Have Vinicius to your left and just destroy everyone rather than forcing yourself on the left, but still not having a striker in the team. Like, from an Mbappe thinking perspective, do you prefer to play striker with Vinicius on your left, or do you prefer to play on the left and a Joselu as the striker? Like, what do you prefer? Do you know what I mean? Like, when you think about it that way. And they're not going to have the money to sign Mbappe and the top striker. So, I don't know. I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's about time we wrap this one up. It's a lot of speculating, a lot of this and that at the moment, but that's unfortunately all the information that we have right now. Obviously, if there is an update, we will keep you updated. Just quickly, I guess, Matt Law said there is no movement on a Conor Gallagher contract extension. Conor Gallagher yesterday or 2 days ago in an interview said as much as, yeah, I'm sure the contract will get sorted out. So... yeah, I'm going to take Connor's word for him more than Matt Law's. I will be honest, mate. To me, it's pretty straightforward that Conor Gallagher will end up staying because Gallagher wants to stay. Gallagher isn't the type of guy that will demand crazy money. He won't sit there and say, I want the same money as Reece. Gallagher knows that's not him.
But also, he does deserve a pay rise as well.
No, he does deserve a pay rise, but not
he's definitely not on enough money at the moment. But yeah, certainly he doesn't need superstar wages, but definitely needs a new deal, 100% this season.
There you go. Yeah, and I just think because he has 18 months left in his contract now, which obviously then you'd say, sell him in the summer or whatever. But with how his form is, his value goes up and up and up. But it's then devalued by only having 1 year left on a contract. So even if you wanted to sell him, you'd be much better off giving him a new contract and then selling him rather than selling him with 1 year left in a contract. So,
to be fair, this ownership is known for doing that because that's what they tried to do to Matt.
Yeah, literally. And Chalobah.
Yeah, and Chalobah.
So, yeah, wouldn't be shocking. But at the moment, with the way Gallagher plays, the Poch will refuse to have him sold anyway. I don't think anyone has to seriously worry about that too much. I want to quickly react to this. Football XE says, Mbappe won't go Madrid. He could have a while ago. He only used the Madrid name to get higher wages to PSG. Now I think Madrid have realized that. No, I disagree with that. I think Real Madrid with COVID just didn't have the money to actually buy him when they wanted to buy him. I think that was
the cash flow problem.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was the major issue, especially with how obviously the Hazard deal backfired on them. And wanting to sign Bellingham, it was all a bit. Obviously, you can argue, well, if they could sign Bellingham, they could have signed Mbappe, but Mbappe would have cost more money with how difficult the situation with PSG and Mbappe is. But obviously, Mbappe also, he's a PSG boy. As much as obviously he started his career at Monaco, he's from Paris. So he also, I don't think, wants to screw over Paris, which is why this whole situation became so difficult. Because he could have just left as a free agent, but he didn't want to do that to PSG. So, yeah, but who knows? They need a tap-in merchant. To be fair, they do need a bit of a tap-in merchant, really. But who are they going to get? Maybe they'll sign Timo Werner. Unfortunately, he won't even score a tap in. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe. Check out Ollie's various channels down in the description below. Of course, Ollie J. Carpenter on Twitter, at The Bridge Pod is his podcast on Twitter, and on all sorts of podcast platforms, Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcast, I assume. So, you can check them out everywhere. Link it down in the description below. Like I say, subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button on your way out. That would be massively appreciated. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Up the Chelsea, upwards and onwards, and we'll see you next time.